The Justice Gang were a group of misfits no one expected, with a name nobody respected. But James Gunn put them at the heart of his DC reboot, shocking fans who thought Superman should stand beside bigger icons. Now that the dust has settled, were they a hit or a miss? When Gunn was handed the keys to head the DCU, instead of playing it safe with a solo Superman story, Gunn looked at this situation and said, you know what this needs? More characters. Way more characters. And he put them in a team called
the Justice Gang!
Not our name, it's just a working name.
I mean, what is this? A group of middle schoolers who couldn't come up with a better name? But here's the thing about James Gunn, and this is why Disney let him resurrect their D-list Guardians into a billion-dollar franchise. He doesn't just throw characters at the wall and hope they stick. There's always a method to the madness. See, the Justice Gang wasn't really about the Justice Gang at all. It was about creating a mirror. Think about it. Superman represents this pure, optimistic ideal, right? Truth, justice, and the American way. But what happens when you put that idealism next to a group of heroes who've been in the trenches? Heroes who've had to make the hard choices. Heroes who know that sometimes the bad guys don't just go quietly to jail. That's the genius move here. Gunn created a team that would challenge everything Superman believes in, without making them villains. Guy Gardner? He's basically Superman if Superman had anger management issues and a terrible haircut.
That haircut should be against your vows.
That what? That what should be what?
Hawkgirl? She's a warrior who solves problems with a mace first and asks questions later. Mr. Terrific? He's so smart he probably calculated the exact probability of this whole thing working out. And Metamorpho? Oh man, Metamorpho is where this gets really interesting. But first, let's talk about the elephant in the room. Or should I say, the Green Lantern in the room. Nathan Fillion as Guy Gardner. Now, I need you to understand something about Guy Gardner. In the comics, he's abrasive. He's overconfident. He has a bowl cut that defies several laws of physics and good taste. And somehow, Nathan Fillion made him likable. This is the same Nathan Fillion who made us fall in love with a space cowboy who got his show canceled after one season. The same guy who spent 8 seasons being charming as a mystery writer playing cops and robbers. And Gunn looked at him and said, you know what? Let's make you the most obnoxious Green Lantern ever, but somehow make it work. And it did work. Because Fillion understood something crucial. Guy Gardner isn't meant to be likable despite being obnoxious. He's meant to be likable because he's obnoxious in exactly the right way. He's that friend who always thinks they're right, but when the chips are down, they're the first one through the door to help you move apartments. But here's where things get complicated. Because not everyone was buying what Gunn was selling. Some critics called the movie overstuffed. Others said it felt more like setup for future films than a complete story on its own. And let's be real. When you hear Justice Gang, your first thought probably isn't, oh wow, what a cool team name. Isabella Merced's Hawkgirl got mixed reviews. Some people loved her fierce warrior energy. Others thought she needed more screen time to develop properly. Her battle cry, which was supposed to be this powerful moment, ended up being divisive. Some people thought it was epic. Others thought it was unintentionally hilarious. And that's the thing about taking big swings. Sometimes you connect. And sometimes you whiff so hard, you spin yourself into the ground. But here's what's fascinating about the audience reaction. While critics were debating whether the Justice Gang worked narratively, fans were already picking their favorites and demanding more screen time for characters they'd never heard of 6 months earlier. Eddie Gathegi's Mr. Terrific became an instant fan favorite.
I've been trying to figure out a way to get it out of here alive. Get it someplace where we can study it.
Oh, come on, man.
People were literally calling for a solo Mr. Terrific movie before Superman even left theaters. That's like watching Iron Man and immediately wanting a Happy Hogan spinoff.
How does cat do that?
You know what this reminds me of? Remember when Marvel announced Guardians of the Galaxy? Nobody knew who these characters were. A talking raccoon? A tree that only says one phrase? A guy who takes everything literally? It sounded like the worst pitch meeting in Hollywood history. But James Gunn had a secret weapon then, and he has the same secret weapon now. He makes you care about the characters first and the powers second. Think about one of your favorite Marvel movie moments. I bet it's not someone shooting a laser beam or flying around. It's probably Rocket crying over Groot. or Peter Quill dancing to distract Ronan, or Tony Stark eating cheeseburgers after escaping a cave. The Justice Gang works for the same reason. When Metamorpho encourages the team to keep their goofy name, despite everyone else wanting to change it, that's not about superhero branding. That's about accepting yourself, flaws and all. That's about finding family in the weirdest places. When Guy Gardner and Mr. Terrific bicker like an old married couple, that's not just comic relief. That's about how real teams work. Not everyone has to like each other, but they have to trust each other when it matters. And Mr. Terrific's role in all this? He's the emotional anchor. He's the one who sees the bigger picture, who understands that this dysfunctional group of misfits might actually be exactly what the world needs. Not because they're perfect, but because they're real. There's something deeply satisfying about watching the smartest person in the room choose to stick with people who drive him crazy, because he recognizes that intelligence without compassion is useless, and compassion without intelligence is dangerous. You need both. Mr. Terrific represents the audience's intelligence. He's asking the questions we would ask, making the plans we wish someone would make, and somehow finding ways to make the impossible seem not just possible, but inevitable. So here's the verdict, and it might not surprise you. The Justice Gang wasn't just a hit, it was a strategic masterpiece. But not for the reasons you'd think. See, James Gunn didn't just introduce 4 new characters. He solved DC's biggest problem. How do you build a universe that feels lived in and real, instead of feeling like a corporate boardroom decided to make money? Marvel spent over a decade introducing their characters one at a time. Iron Man, then Hulk, then Thor, then Captain America, and then Avengers. DC tried to skip steps with Justice League, throwing characters together before we cared about them individually. Gunn found a third option. He introduced a whole team, but he did it through Superman's eyes. We're not watching the Justice Gang movie, we're watching Superman discover that he's not alone, that there are other heroes out there fighting the good fight in their own messy, complicated ways. You're not trying to understand 4 separate origin stories. You're trying to understand how Superman fits into a world that already has heroes in it. And that's why the name Justice Gang actually works. These aren't the polished, corporate-approved heroes of the Justice League. They're the scrappy underdogs who've been doing the work without the recognition. They're the heroes who don't have perfect logos or PR teams or billion-dollar budgets. They're the Justice Gang because they're not trying to impress anyone. They're just trying to do the right thing, even if they can't agree on what to call themselves. The numbers don't lie. 86% on Rotten Tomatoes, $614 million worldwide. More importantly, people are excited about DC again. James Gunn took the biggest risk in superhero movie history, introducing 4 unknown characters in someone else's movie and giving them a name that sounds like a joke, and somehow made it work. The Justice Gang is now part of the DC Universe canon. They have their own Hall of Justice. Fans are demanding solo movies for characters they'd never heard of. And most importantly, DC finally has a foundation for building something that feels organic instead of forced. So what do you think? Was the Justice Gang a brilliant strategic move, or did James Gunn get lucky? Let me know in the comments. And while you're down there, subscribe for more DC content. Thanks for watching.